Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be talking today about thoughts are just thoughts and what that is and why there is more to OCD recovery than that and what's involved with that. Well, first of all, let's have a little look at what we want the OCD recovery journey to look like. Now, when I was on my OCD recovery journey, I loved to read posts that said things like, leave thoughts there, leave anxiety there, don't even get involved with it, live your life, bring in it for the ride, and if you just leave it and you go about your life and you make peace with it being there, it will lose its power. Now, we are naturally going to want to believe that. So geared up in our mind are things we want to hear. Now, our lives are spent surrounding ourselves by people that we want to be friends with. Why? Because we are friends with people that align with our views, both politically, socially, things like that, so they don't confront our views all the time, because we like to feel intact with who we think we are and our values and views. So we mix with people like that. Now, that is the same with our own journeys and understanding. We read articles, tends to be by people that we like to read articles by, and we tend to sort of follow along a pathway, pattern. Now, that is exactly the same in relation to our OCD recovery journey. We want to hear things that we like to, that are things that that appeal to us. Okay, now what's going to appeal a lot to people? I'll give you two options. You tell me which one sounds. We're not going to say anything because it's Instagram Live and I'm talking, but just as hypothetically, which one is more appealing? One, you just go about your life, you never pay attention to OCD, you leave thoughts there, you distance yourself with the thoughts, you live your life, and they come along and you just go about your life and you sort of leave them be and they just pass away and off you go. Or two, which is a combination of that and learning to become a lot more accepting, changing rigid irrational beliefs and adapting our life philosophies and so on, so that we no longer disturb ourselves, beat ourselves up, put ourselves down, but it takes practice and time. Of course, everyone's going to want, including me, option one. So that also brings into account why there are so many books that cover that. One, because of the ease, and two, so that sells the book, and two, because that there isn't a huge amount of knowledge needed for that. So that's the second part of that. And then it can also be sold as a package, so that it can be done briefly and quickly, which people want to get better quickly. So that often is why it is missold as a package. And then you've got something that requires more work. It takes more time. It includes the other, which is learning to accept thoughts, learning to make peace with thoughts, learning to bring it all for the ride. But it also includes a much more in-depth look at getting under our fears, getting under OCD, learning to accept and make peace with worst case scenarios, things that we fear that we haven't approached, that we've sort of left sort of pumping away with the anxiety in the background. So naturally, we are going to want to go along with a sort of more easy approach of just leaving thoughts be and going about our life. Now, the problem with that is, yes, that is a large part of the journey, but the problem with that is this. If you try and dispute an irrational belief and break down a fear that's currently right in front of you, and you do that, then what will happen is when you're doing that, you'll feel more locked to the thought. So then people think, it's making me worse, it's making me more stuck. No, it's not making you worse and it's not making you more stuck. You just have to employ, the way you do it, you have to do it in little bits. So you don't just try and fight off a thought by disputing the irrational beliefs as laid out by Albert Ellis. You have to do it in bits to change your philosophy. So let me give you an example. I won't ever get HIV-related OCD ever again, because I could completely accept if I have HIV. So it never sends the thought in, it never comes in, there's nothing. It just knows there's no point sending it out, okay? Now, if I just left that thought there, yes, I would have got distance from it for a long time. Periods, I would have got distance from it. However, I would have not got full relief. That is a kind of, as I refer to, coasting, where we go from feeling bad to feeling good, and then say, I'm recovered and feeling great, and then feeling bad, and then up and down. And that's what happens, hugely. Now, what is very misunderstood by 99.9% of people is that you do need to get a deeper level of acceptance, as outlined by the founder of CBT, Albert Ellis, which was unconditional self-acceptance, life acceptance, and other acceptance, provides a framework so that we no longer disturb ourselves. Now, why do we need that? Well, because in life, real situations do happen. We could get a disease, able to have acceptance in those and be able to turn off anxiety. Now, and I can assure you, leaving thoughts there and changing my relationship with thoughts, OCD and anxiety, made a huge difference to my recovery journey. However, I then did suffer events in my life, as I am human, as are all of us, that is going to come along and is going to throw a spanner in the works. And had I not been accepting of those things, I had anxiety pumping away 24 hours a day in the background. And I couldn't leave it there. No amount of mindfulness did it. No amount of yoga did it. No amount of massage. Trust me, I did them all. I was going to massage all the time. I was going to meditation all the time. I was trying deep breathing techniques all the time, where I was like, fuck, I can't do any more deep breathing techniques because it's driving me mad, because they are not bringing down the anxiety, because in the background, I am scared of something. Can I make a bit more detail about unconditional life and self-acceptance? Yes, I can, briefly on this point. Most humans, or pretty much all, have conditional self-acceptance. That means I like myself when I play football, good football. I like myself when I am nice to people. I like myself when The problem with that is it sets us up for absolute destruction on ourselves when we turn it in on ourselves, when we don't live up to that. Oh, I'm not good at football today. You're no good. I'm not good at cooking today. You're no good. Oh, I didn't do well in that exam. You're no good. That's a terrible, terrible structure. All humans have learnt that crap since they were a child. So, we have unconditional self-acceptance, which means I am a human, which is true, I am a human. I have value for being alive and human. Well, I'm a collection of cells living on a planet, on a rock, and floating through outer space. There's no other way to rate me. I can't be rated on playing football. Cavemen didn't play football, so how do we know football is a good way of rating people, or how nice people are? Who's to say that that's the way of rating people? So the only way I can rate myself is being alive and human. Why? Because I'm fulfilling my function of being a human. I'm alive, I'm human, I'm on a rock floating through outer space. So I'm fulfilling my function, being alive and being a human. So I have my value there, not on all the other things we can choose to label it on, because that is completely specific to what the person is trying to label somebody on, depending on what era they're doing it in, depending on what view they have, both politically or socially. So we can't say that. So I don't rate myself. I like certain traits, I dislike other traits. I like certain behaviours, I dislike other behaviours. But I am intact just for being alive and human. So I do not down myself, and I do not up myself the same. We live at a time where we see culture just all the time upping themselves. A singer breaks an amazing record and then thinks that they're almost like put themselves on an even higher pedestal, and then we sort of put them on TV where they're maybe on a panel speaking to other humans that are less than them, trying to gain their attention. So we've got situations where we're putting celebrity culture like they're almost like a god, and this nonsense, whereas actually we're all identical, we're all human, we're all going in a hole in the ground, we're all absolutely the same. Some have some behaviours that they grew up with and then they worked hard, which they obviously learned to work hard from either their genetics or their upbringing or from their hard upbringing, and some genetic characteristics that allowed that to develop. So all things things aren't as simple as it looks, okay? So we're not in a position where just for doing well in a certain job, we're better than, because who says that job is the way to rate humans and so on. And if you fail in a job and you end up homeless, you're not less than, it's just a set of circumstances that could happen to any of us that could get in a situation like that. So you've got the combination there, okay? Wow, even being a nice person doesn't make me more or less than someone else. How profound. Absolutely, because what is a nice person? I know that to help an old lady across the road is a nice thing to do, because we've labelled that as a nice thing to do, to help an old lady across the road. But if I'd grown up in a terrible background where maybe I'd had a horrible grandmother and horrible old ladies around me being mean, I might not think that. I might have learnt differently. So you can't rate it on being nice. Well, we've got the idea that being nice is nice. What about someone who hasn't got that kind of empathy, born differently? You can't rate humans like that. I mean, heroes, villains, it's all complete nonsense. A hero is not a hero. It's a human being that does something we see as heroic at this point of time. Okay? That's what it is. Anyone can change. Heroes do horrendous acts as well. Villains do great acts as well, given different circumstances. So it's not like that in reality. Okay. Let's have a look at some of these questions. Just go back in here and answer some of these. Okay. My thoughts are so active today. It's so scary. The images are feeling so uncomfortable. Some days are going to be up and down. Some days you're going to feel a lot of images. Some days you're going to feel a lot of intrusive feelings, intrusive thoughts, intrusive images. Some days good, some days bad. That's all part of the journey. Wear it like an uncomfortable coat. Is there a book that talks about OCD in particular? Well, hopefully my book will be doing that. But you can tell me off for not finishing it quick enough. You'll notice my trick soon when I answer these questions gives me time to have a rest. Why is it that no matter how ridiculous a thought is, you still fear about it? Well, that's a very good question, and it's a question that never gets answered correctly most of the time. Is on some level you do believe it, I imagine. That's why you're scared. On some level you do believe it. And that's why it's locked in. That's why it's got a hold. And obviously unconditional self and life acceptance gets under it, stop it lingering. Can change your relationship with it by leaving it there and going about your life and learning to distance yourself with the thoughts, the feelings, that fusion. Usually it's going to need a deeper acceptance. Can you recover by yourself? Yes, but it is difficult. Okay, it is difficult because there's a lot of understanding that's needed. You need someone really to guide you and look at how you do it, thinking things. It's not, people often send me this message, Rob, any tips and tricks for OCD? It's not the case that I can't tip and trick your way out of OCD. You've got to change the sort of framework that you're operating on. That's got to change, that then lifts. And that's a gradual change in thinking that brings about gradual change in beliefs, that brings about that changes the how you're thinking, how you're sort of seeing things, your perspective in life, and that changes and releases, and that's what gives the release. I can't answer that question because it's Israeli. I can't read that. I keep getting absurd thoughts. I don't think anyone has such thoughts. I'm not sure what to do. I can assure you people do have. Every thought you can think of, people have. So it's not unique. I very rarely see a thought. I hear thousands of thoughts from people all the time. I work with a huge number of people, so I see people with OCD from all over the world, all different places, and all different age ranges. So I can assure you I've heard every type of thought you can imagine. And it's easy to think we're the only one, but we are not the only one with this. We are somebody who's going through something very similar to someone else, but when we are alone experiencing it, it can feel like that. Completely agree. This is the stage that I am at now. Leaving the thought there and ignoring only got me a certain point. Now I'm practicing full self-acceptance. I love myself even with HIV. That is what I like to hear. Fantastic. Right. Haha, I just found another Israeli. I noticed that because I saw Israeli going back and I thought, God, maybe I've got a lot of Israeli followers that I didn't know about. So, it's hard to cope with thoughts. They can feel so real. It doesn't help that I don't feel the same anxiety you do. Don't use anxiety as an indication of real or not real. That's completely irrelevant. And also, it's going to feel as real as it can get. Okay, it's going to feel as real as it can possibly be. That's the nature of it in every way. And you're not going to feel anxious at times, and it's going to intrude at all different times. That's what it's going to be like. Oh, fucking hell, I've got to clean these glasses in the middle of a Instagram live with one hand. Very complicated whilst reading these questions. 1 second. Talk about real event. Well, real event is, I used to get a lot of that. I'd look for a past event in the past that was real and then blow it out of proportion, and then you get lost between the lines of, is it real? Did I take it that far? Did I do worse than that? ... And that's sort of where it goes. Is it common to have themes linked? My solipsism, fear of going further of overlap and link make it feel so much harder to pick apart. Yes, it's going to link to everything. It's going to create everything it can. Anything, any angle, linking to any thought, anything, overlapping different thoughts, harm OCD, linking to a relationship OCD, and so on and so on and so on. Why do our brains do this? We do not need to know all of that. Far too often people use loads of terms to explain the brain and all the detail of the brain. It's usually very complicated and actually nothing we need at all. You don't need to know what an amygdala is. You don't need to know about cortex of the brain, anything. You don't need to know nothing about that. That's not needed for recovery. If I'd known nothing about the brain in terms of what any of the labels were, it would have made not a damn difference. Right, now I can see. Not allowed to see very far. Do I think ERP is effective for recovery? Of course, but what is ERP? ERP is just facing fears. What's facing fears? Just living life, going towards things that we were scared of and showing ourselves that they're not scary. Yeah, I keep exposing myself, but thoughts still come every day. That's because, you see, what it isn't, if you've got fear, like you're terrified of being a bad person, you expose yourself all the time, it's not going to bring the fear down, because that's an idea, it's a concept that needs to sort of breaking down so that you can learn to see that what good and bad means and learning to accept yourself unconditionally. This is never taught properly. I mean, I see tons of people coming to me that have had very lots of ERP and then they've been stuck, or ERP therapists messaging me asking me about with people that are stuck and they can't get over certain bits. It's because unless the philosophy is right, unless they understand the difference that if you label something as good and bad as a person, then the human doesn't want to be a bad person, so OCD is just going to latch to bad person all the time and just keep smashing away at that. So that's not going to help them. So you've got to break down that notion of good and bad. I mean, a quote that I used to post a lot on here was by William Shakespeare, which was, 1 second, let me just plug this phone into charge, otherwise I'll lose the whole Instagram live. It's a post by William Shakespeare. Let's put some lights on. It was a post by William Shakespeare saying that there's no such thing, basically, as good and bad, only thinking makes it so, and that is exactly reality and a really important part of that only thinking makes it so. So there's no specific good and bad. Okay, let's have a look at some of these. Sensory motor OCD I will cover on its own specific Instagram live, because there's obviously quite a bit to cover on that. I won't cover today. Can you talk about how therapists recommend getting help from only therapists? It causes confusion because I think you and other coaches have helped a ton. Yes, I don't understand I can understand, of course I understand. The therapists and coaches can work in harmony together. There is great, with OCD, there's a situation where OCD is a disorder that needs help. People suffering from it, people dying from it all the time. So it needs all the help it can get. And there are good therapists and there are bad therapists, and there are good coaches and there are bad coaches. And I often talk of the very bad coaches, not specifically of them as an individual, but of things that are done which I disagree with and I do not like, and I think need to change, as I do with therapists that I think many therapists that do things that I don't like, as I was talking about here in relation to certain things. So you're going to have good and bad in both, and I think they can work very much together. And I think it's a case of making sure that the therapists and the coaches have a good understanding of OCD. That's what I'm always talking about, is improving an understanding of OCD. And I think that in the sort of landscape of OCD, you will see varying different approaches and various different things that people believe, but there can be harmony there, and I think that's important, and I think that everyone should work together as a community to help people get better, and there's things that we dislike, and there's things that we want to change. Like one thing that I was saying about coaches that I didn't like, that I saw some coaches doing, but it's certainly not something that's specific to coaches, but specific to therapists just the same, is where people were doing very intensive courses, so a course for like 2 or 3 weeks, and trying to get someone better, and then offering no follow-up support afterwards, or sort of like complete relief, sort of like OCD recovery in the short term, or just exposures only and not doing anything else. And I think that causes a great deal of trouble. People feel very lost when they finish that. You see that a lot. You see that in the hospital system in all around the world, a sort of 6-week intensive CBT or some other therapy that then just comes to the end and the person feels completely lost. So I think that really needs improving. So yeah, that's in answer to your question. Hello, are urges that feel really real and strong are possible, like you don't want to do it but you have to? Hello, are urges that feel really real and strong are possible, like you don't want to do it but you have to? Yeah, they'll always feel like there's an urgent call to action. So it's going to feel like that, very urgent call to action. It's going to feel, you've got to take this decision now, you've got to do this, you must, like with relationship, you must break up with your boyfriend. It's always looking to get your absolute attention, that fight or flight feeling. The books I recommended on the reading list you can get from Amazon and so on. They're some of the best books that I can think of for OCD. How is religious OCD treated? Well, religious OCD, you can't apply rational thinking so much to it, because by definition, religion is an irrational belief. But we don't want people can hold faith. There's no problem. Why not? I was religious myself up until the age of 18, and there's no reason they have to drop their faith. They can keep their faith, but they need to learn to live better with uncertainty, change relationship with the thoughts, intrusive feelings, and so on. That helps get under that. That's the way to get under that, but it takes practice and time. How does OCD get triggered? I feel like I was fine. Yeah, like for me, it just suddenly started at 17. Bang! One day I suddenly got it. I was sitting in school and I thought, fucking hell, what's just happened? Really thinking about this irrationally, about some unprotected sex, HIV risk situation. There's obviously no HIV risk, barely any, but I didn't know anything else at that age, that kind of situation. So yeah, it will just start. I need to know about all the inner workings there. Yeah, NHS therapists in the UK don't tend to know much about OCD. I can't imagine there would be much chance in finding any NHS therapist who really understands OCD. I can't imagine that at all. But I can imagine them being helpful and offering some helpful advice and getting people going with some helpful things. But if they're suffering, say, with POCD and it's completely locked on and they're convinced it's real, it'd be very hard for them to calm the person down. Let's have a look. A lot of questions here today. Good questions. POCD, urges, really difficult. Yeah, well, it's going to come in with urges. It comes in with urges for me, like in anything today, but barely, but I hardly ever notice it. But like, say, for example, I was walking in a supermarket and there was kids running by me and they're like just bonking into things. I'll get an intrusive feeling that will just come out of nowhere that might be, say, to kick them. But I'm not going to kick them. It's the last thing I want to do, but it feels like that. And then it will often, as I walk past them, it will then false memory with, you just did try and kick them, you just tried to trip them, or and then that used to really catch me. I remember many times where it did. So yeah, I can completely relate to that. Yes, OCD gets heightened during life changes, buying a new house, going on holiday, becoming boyfriend and girlfriend, getting married, having a baby. As you're moving towards things where you want things to be more perfect and more safe and more calm, it turns up the heat. As we're sort of scouring for more control and more safety, it does that. You can't just see it as ridiculous because your brain won't take that risk. A 0.0000001% risk to OCD, it won't let go. A lot of questions today. A lot of questions. I like these. This is good. Some very good questions. Can you ever cover how derealization or disassociation can fuel certain themes? Well, yeah. Derealization and disassociation are obviously going to relate to schizophrenia because that's the nature of it, and existential, solipsism, and so on, going crazy related OCDs. But it's about wearing that like an uncomfortable coat. It's okay to feel depersonalized. It's okay to feel derealized. I mean, look, when you're a kid, you have so many weird physical symptoms and things like that, or illnesses that you don't give a shit about because your mum, you think the world's safe and your mum's told you you're all right, so you're okay. It's like today. What have I done? I had my parents coming to stay for 3 days, and so I was very busy, and then we went out last night. I got in very late, so I had a few drinks, so little bit hungover today. Yeah, a little bit hungover today, and I wouldn't care less about that. Why? Because I know what it is. But when I was with OCD, I used to think, oh, something's going wrong. Maybe I'm going crazy, something like that. So that's how it latches on. Any tips to get back to sleep? When I woke up, my thoughts stuffed my day very badly. Any tips to get back to sleep early AM? When I woke up, my thoughts, it starts with everything. Yeah, well, what you need to try and do is not trying to fix all your thoughts at night. Yeah, what you're doing is when you're in bed, you think, oh, I'll fix all my OCD. Like when people wake up in the morning, they feel anxiety and they're like, right, I've got to fix all my OCD, have it all sorted, all fixed, all done and finished. You can't do that. That's what adds to it. That's what fuels it. So you want to leave that be and not try and go through that cycle of trying to get that all worked out and fixed at 3 in the morning. I want my OCD to become better before I have kids because I also think, no, do not wait for that. Do not wait for that. Same with POCD. Go and have kids. If you want kids, go and have them. Encourage mums all the time that come to me. They've been putting off kids to go and have them if they want to have them and they're in position to have them, because otherwise you're letting OCD win. So it's very, very important that you do. Oh, yes. Sometimes I feel like I want real tragedies to happen. Yes, we can feel like, oh, I wish I had cancer instead of OCD. But I can tell you, if you did have cancer instead of OCD, you'd want it the other way around usually. It's just, it feels like that. Any other questions relating to OCD that you want to ask, send them across now. I'm always on here. I always think on the most important thing with OCD recovery is being able to ask questions. I was so infuriated for so long when I was stuck in the recovery journey myself, not being able to ask anyone any questions, not being able to know what to ask, who to ask, all this kind of stuff. You can ask me anything you want. Relapse after recovery, very common. I had many relapses after I was feeling a lot better. OCD with GAD, tricky. Yeah, I had GAD, tricky. Yes, GAD lingers. Physical symptoms for a long time. They tend to take a long time. Claire Weeks said if they went in a year, that would be very fast. So yeah, GAD can linger. I still get some anxiety symptoms that come on randomly in the night when I've been sleeping or something. I can notice that sometimes come in, then they go. Rarely in the day. Can notice it on an old thought or fear or sort of pattern. It can do that. So those situations can happen, and they're not the end of the world. But when it was a chronic cycle, that was different. That's because of the fear that was pumping away there too. I don't understand unconditional self-acceptance. Well, it takes time to understand. That's why I've got the reading list as a good place to start. Good place to start is the YouTube videos by Albert Ellis, the founder of CBT, talking about unconditional self-acceptance, and the books. The first book on my reading list, How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything. That's a good place to start to give you some understanding of that. What is the process of getting better? Do the thoughts stop coming, or do they just not bother you? Well, first they bother you less, and then after a while they stop coming. So I barely get them. I get them very, very rarely with this any intrusiveness. Intrusiveness loses its power very quickly. I can't tell the difference between having it and not having it. I can't tell the difference between having OCD, as I still have OCD genetically, I imagine, but I can't feel myself suffering it, so I can't tell the difference between before I thought I had OCD and didn't, so there's no difference there. So yeah, and it tends to be, the recovery journey tends to be sort of faded as we get better and better. It tends to lose its grip bit by bit, and it's very sort of like a roller coaster, up and down with lots of peaks and troughs. How much time to internalize acceptance? It's a bit of a how long is a piece of string question, because it takes time to practice and to really understand it. It does take a lot of reading. It does take quite a bit of practice to come to terms with it, and you're not going to do that straight away overnight. That's not going to just suddenly happen. It's going to take a little while to embody that and to really feel that. Yeah, you won't feel the thoughts. You're not going to notice them. Like I never have any thoughts that, like right now, in my mind, that's blank. I'm not noticing anything at all. Completely blank, apart from the words I'm saying, which are just coming out automatically. There's nothing at all there. No intrusiveness, some ideas that I'm thinking. There's nothing. There's nothing there. So you don't. Before I couldn't do that. I'd be, please, just be able to sit for 10 seconds just to feel that peace. I could never do that. I studied criminology, and now I'm not able to read anything related to that. I have exams next month, and I don't know if I'm going to study. I have pharmacy. You want to start reading all that stuff. You want to be going towards it, watching a documentary, but build up to that little by little. Watching the news, watching criminal programs, all that stuff, part of life. I used to avoid horror movies all the time when I was suffering from OCD. Now I love them, watch them. Not all the time, but I do watch them. Okay, guys, I think that's covered quite a bit of things in there today. I look forward to being on another Instagram Live and covering a lot more with you and covering these questions. Always on here. You can ask me anything you want on the questions here on Instagram Lives, and I will see you next time. All right, guys, see you later.